I want to peel back just a little bit because obviously you're well established in the world of real estate development from Ghana, but there's a stop here that has a sports story to it. So how did we end up as the chief administrative officer for the NFL? Spent 7 years with the Cleveland Browns. Is this during the Roger Goodell tenure as commissioner, or is this like Paul Tagliabue times? When is this happening? How did we end up there?
How did that happen? I get asked that a lot, as you can imagine. But it's actually such a linear story that it's actually not a mystery at all. My last public position was as the chief economic advisor to Mayor Willie Brown of San Francisco. So I was a public official working for Mayor Willie Brown. And at that time, this is in 1996 or so, at that time, the city of San Francisco, or the mayor's office, was challenged with the notion that the 49ers could potentially leave the city of San Francisco. And as you no doubt know, gentlemen, no mayor wants to be the mayor that loses a sports team if they can avoid it. And Willie Brown was no exception. So he charged me with the responsibility of working with the 49ers to try to find a way to retain them. And he was successful in going to the ballot to raise about $100 million at that time to invest in the new stadium. So that was my role, the day-to-day liaison between the mayor's office and the 49ers. In that time frame, the Cleveland Browns upended and went to Baltimore, became the Baltimore Ravens. The city of Cleveland sued the NFL. The NFL ultimately agreed to reestablish an NFL team in Cleveland. And the CEO of the 49ers, who had become a good friend of mine, became the CEO of the Cleveland Browns. And one of his first official acts was to invite me to become the chief administrative officer to run the business and support in building the stadium in Cleveland. And that is how I ended up in Cleveland.
That's incredible. But back to real estate, really quick with California, outside of COVID and people having a desire to work from home, like what went wrong that led to like the collapse of the value in California real estate and like the mass exodus? And as a city builder, do you think about those things that went wrong so you can make sure that those mistakes don't happen in Detroit and Cleveland?
Well, yeah, Ian, it's almost 20/20 hindsight always. Right now, we can all seem really smart about looking back on what happened. But if you think about it, there was a significant concentration of effort around tech and tech space. And there's incredible competition among tech companies to get into the next best space as they were vying for the talent. Talent acquisition was probably the most important thing in San Francisco, and talent acquisition meant that we were creating places that these youngsters would want to be. And that was the focus of all city building efforts. Nobody knew at the time that there would be an opportunity for these youngsters at some point, or these employees at some point, to actually work from home. And when the pandemic happened and people evolved and situations evolved rather, and folks had the opportunity to work from home, they actually enjoyed the freedom that it gave them. And it is obvious that it made hiring a lot more difficult. So companies were much more relaxed in what they were asking of their potential employees and providing more leeway for them to work from home. And then there were technological tools that enabled people to work from home. So all of a sudden, as you can see, there was a significant amount of office space that was essentially vacant. Yeah. But in the prospect of building up cities that would be exciting for employees in the downtown location, cities created a great deal of amenities down there. Restaurants and services also came downtown, but those services absolutely required on those 9 to 5 employees. And when those 9 to 5 p.m. employees didn't show up, those services frankly suffered. And as they suffered, they closed. And when they closed, the downtowns became even less desirable. So nobody really wanted to come downtown anyway, because there was nothing going on. So it's almost a negative feedback, if you will, from that whole point of why would you come to worked in an empty office when your favorite and where your favorite restaurants or coffee places no longer were open. You wouldn't. You just stay at home and work. So I think as we look back, again, perhaps too much focus on one particular industry, but that was driven primarily by markets, Wall Street, etc.
Yeah.
Two, I don't think we ever paid enough attention to the variety of places and spaces in the downtown that would attract more, that would be more attractive to more than just the workers, so that folks would feel like you're actually creating 18-hour cities that had not only the entertainment but also services downtown in a manner that folks would always want to be downtown. And certainly I don't think we created enough of the public-private partnerships necessary to activate those downtowns in a manner that would because you constantly have to work at attracting people to come to a downtown core. And certainly I know when I was in the city, we didn't pay enough attention to the effort that takes to ensure that would always be a core part of the city experience. We relied primarily on the private sector to do what they would do, and they were subject to the marketplace.
So, switching gears a little bit, you had mentioned earlier that you took a company public, and I think after that, it was kind of like when you retired for a little bit, right? Like, can you talk about that as far as the process of actually you experiencing that in that moment? Because very few people have an opportunity to actually reach a point where they can take a company public, and what does life look like for you at that point in time, like mentally? Did you feel like you accomplished enough, or did you feel like you just wanted to just figure things out for a moment until you just hit the reset button to move forward?
Well, that's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. I think at the point in time that I made the decision to retire, I had begun to invest in, and we had created a company called Tech Golf in Ghana, and I was also pondering a development in Ghana, and so that's one. Two, the primary project that I was working on in San Francisco was beginning to hit some fairly significant political roadblocks, and I had been with this project for almost 15 years. In fact, I'd taken it through the full entitlement process, and I had actually also taken it through 2 ballot initiatives and one, which is fairly difficult in San Francisco. So I think I was at that point in time when I said, perhaps this is time for somebody else to continue that journey, and I could perhaps begin to think about spending more time in Ghana and seeing if I could bring some of the experience and maybe resources I had to Ghana. And it was, and I candidly, it's a good question, because I also thought perhaps I might also have something to share, and maybe I'd write a book or something like that. And if you gentlemen will recall, around in February and March, this country was had a significant amount of civil disruption, primarily around George Floyd and then Breonna Taylor, and it was a very difficult time. And I will tell you that watching the news and as I said, in February and March, and just the amount of civil unrest that was going on throughout the country, and mostly in the urban areas, it made one reflect. What could somebody who, like myself, who had been in urban development all their lives, either from the public sector, other than the 7 years, I guess, with the Browns, or in the private sector, what could we potentially have done differently? And so it was a moment of reflection. It was a moment of reflection, and often you find that you are bound by the rules of engagement of any profession you're in, and perhaps those are the wrong rules. And so those are the kinds of things that I had an opportunity to reflect upon. And it just so happened that as I was reflecting on it, I was, as I said, recruited by the Gilberts. And in my conversation with Dan and Jen Gilbert, it was clear that their fundamental commitment to urban development, the redevelopment of Detroit and Cleveland, had a strong underpinning of their philosophy to do things for more than profit. And candidly, that resonated to my heart and certainly my mind, and was one of the key reasons why I, again, got off the couch.